Absolutely. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us as we dive into an intimate conversation with 5 very talented and experienced event professionals. My name is Lance Randall, Vice President of Sales at Steelhead. I've been with the company for, it looks like 21 years. I wanted to make sure that I managed us to a pandemic, so here we are. Before we introduce our esteemed panel, I'd like to give a quick overview of our next hour together. But before we do that, I'd like the panel to quickly introduce themselves. Please give your name, company name, title, and the industry that you serve, please. Anne, would you mind going first, please?
Sure. Hello, my name is Anne Devera, and I'm the Senior Manager of Strategic Marketing Engagements for UKG, which stands for Ultimate Kronos Group. This is actually our new company brand that combines 2 amazing organizations that merged in April this year, Ultimate Software and Kronos. With our tagline of "Our purpose is people," we offer cloud-based people management solutions for companies in all industries and on a global scale. I'm actually calling from Dallas, Texas, and I'm excited to be part of our conversation today.
Wonderful, thank you. Chris LaRoy, would you mind going next, please?
Yeah, Chris LaRoy with Cox Automotive. I've been with the company for about 7 years, and I'm the Director of Industry Events and Trade Shows. And we are in the automotive space. Some of our consumer brands that you may know are Auto Trader and Kelley Blue Book. Some of our larger brands, Manheim, Dealer Track, that offer a lot of software solutions for dealers throughout the automotive space.
Super. Tina Newman, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tina Newman. I work for a company called Waystar, and I'm the Director of Events. We are in the health IT industry, which means we provide software to large hospitals as well as providers. Our primary product that, if anyone would be familiar, is revenue cycle management and clearinghouses.
Super. Thank you. Ruthy Goldman.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ruthy, calling from Virginia, Northern Virginia. I'm the Senior Creative Director at Alarm.com. Alarm.com is a technology platform providing smart solutions for homes and businesses, including security, access, video, energy management, and more. Alarm.com is not sold direct to consumers, so our industry served, especially during events, is our channel that we work through, and as well as partners, existing and prospect, and obviously competitors in the field as well.
Sure, thank you. And last but not least, Bill Glenn, please.
Hey, Lance. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for inviting me to this. I am Bill Glenn, Vice President of Worldwide Demand for a company called ExtraHop, H-O-P. We are based in Smoky, Seattle, Washington at the moment, and we've been a longtime Steelhead customer, and most of our marketing dollars pre-COVID were going to very large events to serve the IT security industry, and the category that we play in is network detection and response, or NDR, and we serve over 500 customers today in the large enterprise category worldwide.
Super. Thank you, everybody. And let me introduce our very own Andrew Childers, Market Manager here at Steelhead, who's going to be our moderator for today's event. Andrew, take it away, buddy.
Thank you. It is great to be here for another session that we're doing here at Steelhead Productions. I've been in the industry coming up in about 10 years, 2020 included. It's never been boring. So I will say that. We have a great setup for us today. We will introduce a discussion topic. Then we'll do an audience participation poll because we want to hear from all of you. We realize we have some great people joining us today, so we want to get your feedback as well. Then we'll turn it over to the panel discussion. And knowing that we have so much good content to go through, we were sharing with the panel earlier that we're going to ask that we keep all answers to about 2 minutes or less if possible, knowing that we all have a lot to say because there's so much going on in the industry. If you tend to run over, I will lovingly give you a little wave to try to invite you to help wrap it up so we can keep going forward. But we've got some great people and some great questions here, so let's jump right into it. It is no secret that the event industry has been greatly disrupted by everything COVID and beyond. So we'd like to start out by getting a gauge on how our group here has been affected. So we're going to start off with our first poll question for the audience, and we'll ask everyone to please quickly click your answer. And the question is, what percentage of your trade show and event workforce has been either furloughed or laid off? First answer is up to 20%, between 20 and 40%, 40 to 60%, or 60% plus. So if you would, real quickly here, please give us a quick answer, and we'll close down that poll and show the answer before we turn it over to our panel. Wow, okay. So we've got about 35% with about 35% of our answers said that 60% or more has been either furloughed or laid off, which is just incredible. The first answer, this is fortunate, 65% said up to 20%. Fortunate in the sense that it's not more, so that's good, but we can clearly see there are some changes happening in our industry. So let me turn it over to our esteemed panel now. Events have stopped for the time being, so we'd love to ask, how are you staffing your departments differently? Have you been able to make any reassignments to other sales and marketing project initiatives to help mitigate furloughs and layoffs? How's staffing been for you? And we'll open it up to our panel if any one of you wants to jump in, or we can go in order, whatever's easier for you.
I'll jump in.
Bill, go ahead, please.
Okay, so we're fortunate at ExtraHop that we are in the 0% category of layoffs and furloughs, which has been phenomenal. I think a lot of us were worried that those hard decisions would need to be made. And what we have been able to do to that point about repurposing is, we shifted a lot of our marketing, live event marketing dollars, either into virtual events or into more direct digital plays. And we asked our event marketers to think about how they could expand their skill set and what might interest them in the digital or the virtual categories, and basically had them raise their hand and volunteer to say, how can I help other parts of marketing as we make this shift? And so I've been really fortunate to have a team that has that flexibility and that interest in expanding their skill set. And I think it's really proved to be super valuable for them in a career path. And we're excited to say that hopefully we don't have to ever go into anything but 0% on that poll.
That's great. I'll go next.
I also was fortunate to have 0% of furlough. What we did was very similar to what Bill just mentioned. It gave us the opportunity to actually become more independent on the needs that we have pre-event. So a lot of our marketing, we used to depend on our individual that oversees our Marketo landing pages, and a lot of the email communication that we used to send out has changed substantially, primarily because we have learned ourselves kind of how to streamline that a little bit. And now we're as I said, we're much more independent. We don't have to wait on our comms team to, make edits and things. Of course, they still make the final proof, but we can create those landing pages now. We can do much more internally with the events team, which gives us a quicker response to what we need to do for our pre-marketing.
Anne, have you had a similar experience or anything different?
Yeah, it's very similar in our end. Fortunately, we've been able to maintain the 0% as well, maintain our staffing count. In order to do this, we did a couple of things. From a financial aspect, of course, we reduced program budgets and worked through a lot of the commitments that we've already made for in-person this year. So as many of us know here, we have to commit about a year in advance to our events. And so the big part of the first part of the shutdown was going through the financial part of it. And then there were a lot of moving pieces, such as when will this be over, right? So thankfully we were quick in planning a strategy that assumed that it'd be on hold for the rest of the year. From a productivity standpoint, as has been mentioned, we've brainstormed on how to add value, increase our skill sets, and still work towards our marketing goals, but within the new rules of engagement per se. So to come up with ways to connect people without the travel and in-person events. So I remember strategy calls back in April discussing what are our new rules today? So these included, well, we can use the internet and social media, right? We can ship stuff, with UPS or the post office or something similar. We have access to email, the phone, the handwritten notes, and of course our speakers for thought leadership and product-centric events, and just to have a conversation or to do an activity together over Zoom or happy hours, things like that.
It's been impressive to see how quickly everyone in our industry has been reacting and thinking through what can we do with sort of a proactive approach, considering something so unprecedented. Ruthy, how's your experience been?
First of all, I have a cat on my lap, so that's never happened before when I was in the office working full time. That's one of the perks, sometimes not a perk, but so we are also very fortunate to be in the 0 category, extremely fortunate and grateful for that. Definitely had to go through some changes with how we approach things, but very similarly to what we already heard today. It's very important for us to keep operating while we're embracing this new reality. Also think for the future and not already assume that things are going to be canceled next year. So we are trying to keep ourselves committed to timelines that we have and not get distracted by the lack of knowledge if it's going to happen, not let that kind of take down our energy and keep striving to think in the same kind of state of mind that we operated in the past. I think it's definitely for people on the team, and it was mentioned already, you get to brush on new skills, different things that we haven't done before, different creative ways to get people engaged, whether it's with webinars and recordings that we do ahead of time and get people kind of excited, and different panels that we have thrown together as well. On top of I think, brushing off on your negotiation skills, because again, a lot of things that were set have to get changed now, and trying to figure out what works best for everyone. I think it's definitely a skill set that we're all getting much better at in these days.
We are so fortunate to be talking to a panel that by and large didn't have to do a bunch of reductions in staffing. A lot of that is credited to the sharp thinking that you all are employing. Chris, certainly we have sensitivity to those that are watching that haven't had so much luck and that have had to do some cuts in staffing. How's that experience been for you and your team?
Yeah, unfortunately, we haven't been in the 0% category, but I give the company a lot of credit because they've done a lot of initiatives and had a lot of like company culture type events and things that have come into play to keep people's spirits up. Because as we go through, change is kind of our business. That's all of our business at this point. And it's uncomfortable, and whether it's furloughs or layoffs, trying to keep morale up is extremely difficult. So for us, very selfishly looking at Cox Automotive, they've done a great job of trying to do that. Easier said than done through a lot of these different things. But as we've worked through this, some of the other things we've done have already been mentioned, as far as, learning about other pieces of the business, streamlining our processes. So when things do come back, because they are coming back, to make sure we're ready for it. If anybody has that silver bullet of if they know when it's coming back, that'd be great to share that too. But one thing I did want to mention is we've went through this and we've looked at, learning more about other companies or learning more about inside what we're doing. Is when you go through this, you quickly learn who partners versus vendors are. And that was one big learning that we went through. And I say that included in the staffing conversation, because whether it's inside the walls of your company or folks that we spend more time with outside of the walls of the company, it's agency partners and creative partners and various different partners. It's so valuable, and you quickly realize who the true partners are. And this is a shameless plug for Steelhead. I can't count the number of times that we've had folks that have called to just ask how things are going, and that goes a long way. So the big thing I would just stress for the panel is, if you're in that position, reaching out and saying hi or reaching out to ask how you can share things goes a long way.
That is great advice. Thank you. And
just
really
Rhiannon,
quickly, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So just really quickly to the panelists, there is a Q&A opportunity for the attendees to direct questions for you specifically. I see that Anne actually had a question that was directed at her. So if you would just keep an eye out, if you see a red icon lighting up in the Q&A section, just click on it and check to see if any of the attendees today have a question for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhiannon. And then, one of the topics that came up in a lot of your answers is a great segue into the next question that was previously submitted to us, and that is around the topic of this ingenuity that we've all been experiencing as we pivot and make shifts. So the question is, have you picked up any new skills to advance your career within the last 6 months? Goodness knows we all have a little more time. So we'll pop it up as an audience poll. So everyone, if you'll just give us a quick yes or no answer. Have you picked up any new skills to advance your career within the last 6 months? Certainly our panel has, and we'll hear about their experience a little bit. Okay, we can go ahead and close down that poll and get a quick gauge of what we've been seeing. Overwhelmingly 93% yes. We all have a little more time on our hands. So let's hear a little more specifically about which skills and tools and educational components have been helpful in helping all of you navigate your teams through this strange time that we're in and into the future. Why don't we start with you, Tina?
Oh, sure. So not only have I done a lot of research, I think the first month, maybe 30, 60 days outside of renegotiating contracts, as mentioned earlier, the one thing that I did was I spent a lot of time on other companies' virtual platforms. And of course, the content was very interesting and important, but also I was looking to see how that platform was allowing engagement with the audience, how well it was coming across, other than an enhanced webinar, what other enhancements that were being provided by the different tools that are out there. So I think that one of the skill sets that I learned, other than the digital marketing and the virtual platform aspects, was definitely learning again. I mean, I almost felt like I was learning how to do trade shows from day one, because we really have to think of it in a totally new way. This week, my company was involved with 4 virtual trade shows. Every single one of them was different. And when we had pre-show meetings with our sales team, we had to let them know that this is not what you are anticipating. This is a totally different mindset. This is a totally different, situation. It's not the same as what it used to be. So having that knowledge of what was being offered ahead of us actually participating in the virtual trade shows was really very good for us, because now we're kind of now we're teaching our teams, our sales teams, on how to interact and how to engage and how to participate in these new virtual trade shows.
There's certainly that cross-pollination happening across so many companies and everyone putting on different hats. Bill, in your first answer, you alluded to that. Can you tell us a little bit about what skills you've learned and how it's helping to carry your team forward?
Yeah, I think Tina and I might be kindred spirits, because I think I want to just say ditto to what Tina said. Because for me personally, it has been about like honing my negotiation skills. But maybe take that a step further is there are so many organizations that we invested with and in, Steelhead obviously being one of them, but so many more that go into putting on a great live event. And these are relationships and partnerships that we, built for years, and we want to maintain for years to come, no matter what happens in, post-COVID world, hopefully sooner rather than later. And so I think, that the negotiation was less about like, how do we help our finance team or how do we help our legal team, but more so about how do we do this in a way that still continues the trust and the partnership and the respect that we've built, and do it in a tasteful way, but also have the partners recognize that we're all in a different financial situation, and are they willing to help us get creative in those contracts so that it comes out more as a win-win for the long term. So that may be more about extending contracts for a couple of additional months or years. It may be about switching things from a live event fashion to a digital fashion. And then I'll just answer for that first answer about my team. I think the coolest part about this, and if there is anything cool about COVID, is that the team is saying, you know, hey, I've always wanted to learn more about account-based marketing, ABM, or I've always wanted to like figure out like how to do Google Analytics, or, you know, this is the time when we always said we wanted to do more professional development and send some of our people to courses online. And it actually gives us that opportunity to do it, but it also puts more skin in the game for them, where I don't just say, you know, go figure out a class to take. Like I work with my team to say, you know, where do you want to be 2 to 5 years from now in your career? And let's not do professional development just necessarily for the live event world, but let's think about, you know, what it is that you haven't learned in your marketing career. And let's go intentionally have you look at some courses and work with me as your manager to figure out what is the best thing that will get you to that, you know, that longer term phase of your career.
Thank you. There's some nods to what Chris is bringing up earlier too about knowing really who you can rely on, right? And like, who are those partners that can bring in those resources to help facilitate all that learning that you were just talking about, Bill. Chris, what's your experience been like? Anything new that you've learned that's helping to guide your team forward?
Yeah, patience. I mean, as we go through this, I say that somewhat jokingly, but as we go through this, I feel like our world's been turned upside down from a live event space, and having patience as you go through what feels like hundreds of demos of virtual environments. And you know, echoing what Tina said, is I feel like we've spent more time looking at the virtual environments and learning from others that it's turned into a full-time job, but also realizing once we have that patience in the learning and the education piece of being confident to move forward. I feel like a lot of the time we're paralyzed by, we don't know if it's the right way forward, it's something new, we're not 100% sure, and having the confidence that we don't need to follow what everybody else is doing, that there's a lot of things out there in this virtual world that we're living in now, gives us the ability to do these new exciting things that quite honestly have come up in the past, but now we're pushed to actually do them and do them quicker. So that's kind of the biggest learning we have. I'd love to say I've you know, all those, but probably master of none, but I can identify what we've tried to learn.
Anne, have you had a similar experience?
Yes, absolutely. All of the above of what's been said. I know that the biggest part of this these times for us was trying to evaluate all of the different platform solutions out there to execute the virtual events. So, providing that virtual experience. So I've been actually participating as an attendee a lot at different virtual conferences to help evaluate how something is delivered by the host for that particular group, using the platform that they're using. But the other thing that I wanted to add is definitely during this time, we've dedicated time to learn more about our target audience at our events. So for example, many of our experiences are for human resources executives. So we do a lot of research and joining HR webcasts and keeping up with hot HR topics to help us expand our knowledge of what the HR community is going through this year, and thus be better at offering relevant themes and content at events.
Ruthy, we know you've learned to work with cats interrupting you, but we'd love to hear what else you've learned during this time with having some extra time at home, and if there have been any other great skills that have helped you guide your team forward.
So I love that Chris mentioned patience, because I think that's a big thing that we're all trying to, again, figure out the balance between moving forward. As you know, it's still a business that we need to stay committed to, but also handling a lot of insecurities and the unknowns and what's happening, and how do you plan when you don't know what's coming? Then how do you figure out how to put one step ahead of the other, and figure out, okay, can we commit to anything? What is a commitment anyway? So, and similar to what Tina said, it's almost like learning how to do a lot of the things that we've done so many years. You kind of have to stop for a second and say, is that even going to be translatable into this different platform that we're now facing? Not to mention the fact, is it even appropriate? Like during this time, you have to be very considerate in what our other partners are going through. We have been fortunate again that we have been in that 0 to 20% for all roles in the company. But what about the other our partners? They may not be as fortunate, and we can't just continue business as usual. We have to be very, very cognizant of that. So there's definitely a lot of learning that's happening every day. One of the, and I'm not alone, my partner in crime at Alarm.com is Deanna, and she's been learning a lot, definitely on the side of negotiations and kind of what are we even going to do moving forward. But in the creative side of things, again, how do you keep your team motivated to keep designing things when you can't even promise them that any of that is going to even be used when the time comes? So I think celebrating successes is something that we try to do often and as much as we can, just to keep everyone excited. And it's not necessarily that it will have to be launched in order for it to be a success. So, yep.
A great point. Several of the answers that we heard here brushed up on the topic of all things going virtual. So why don't we jump to a question we have about that? And given that there are so many restrictions now, many have been looking into what's possible in a virtual world. So our question for the audience is, have you integrated any kind of enhanced marketing mix with anything virtual or digital? That's a quick yes, no, or perhaps if you're just in the category of, I'm interested in virtual and digital things, but maybe haven't implemented it yet. We'd love to get a gauge on where you all are and stepping into this virtual world. Yes, you've integrated something with virtual or digital, a no, or you're in the interested category and perhaps haven't integrated it yet. Okay, why don't we go ahead and close that down and see what we've got. Okay, so we are stepping into a real new world. As we can see, 76% said yes, that they've brought in some kind of virtual or digital solution, and we certainly heard a bit about that from the panel. 20% then follows with being in that interested category. So now we'll turn this back over to our panel and ask, what are you currently doing to stay connected with your customers and prospects in lieu of being able to meet them face-to-face at live events? And why don't we start with you, Bill, because I think you alluded to it a little bit earlier on.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I think that the thing that I'm going to guess a lot of the panelists and a lot of the audience have already done, but I still feel like we were early to go do it, was not just to say, how do we work with those third parties to just take that live event and switch it and go virtual and see what happens. I think it was Tina who said, we're not sure about how the platforms are going to work and if it's going to be the same experience. But the word experience was what we rallied around. And we said, how do we start to take on at ExtraHop more of our own events that we run? And we get help from third parties to execute on them, but we want to create meaningful experiences, especially for our customers and obviously any of our prospects that are in the later stage funnel. We want them to remember us. And in this world of Zoom fatigue, right, and just, working from home, we want to give them something that makes them feel like a VIP, whether it's a customer or a prospective customer. And so, we've looked at a number of different experiences that we can deliver, anything from wine tasting, whiskey tasting, health events, because we know it's not all about alcohol, and that probably isn't the right thing to do for the long term in COVID world. but also things like for our audience, like it's more about like knowing your audience and what do they like to do. So as an example, we serve an IT security audience, and we've got this cool program where we get a smaller group together and they play a virtual Dungeons and Dragons like game. And they also do some other e-gaming competitive things. So it basically is about, building community, giving somebody something to look forward to. And hopefully, they remember that when it comes time to buy. And this is really about, building that relationship for the long term, not about trying to sell them something online in a virtual world, because it's so hard to do that right now.
And we know it's so important to stay visible, and it's interesting to see Dungeons and Dragons included the very different ways that we can keep people engaged Ruthy, I don't know about you, but Bill had me when he mentioned whiskey tasting. How has your experience been, and have you parlayed into the virtual world or found some creative ways to keep people engaged?
We have, in a very limited way so far. I think one of the things that we have found to be more successful is to do very specific experiences. So instead of opening like a really large event that will invite a whole lot of people, is creating more specified webinars or training sessions that are going to be very specific and targeted to a specific audience. I think, like Bill mentioned, with the Zoom fatigue, it's just harder and harder to stay focused and to sift through a whole lot of information that may not be like pertain to you specifically. So if you come at least and okay, during this hour, I'm going to listen to something very, very specific, keep it short, keep it sweet, and move on. One of our biggest events, ISC in Vegas, shifted around multiple times this year, and it's actually happening next month virtually. This is going to be the first time that we are actually going to participate in a virtual setting. We have no expectations. We don't really know how it's going to pan out, and we'll have to wait and see. We can report later.
Zoom fatigue certainly is something that I think we're going to see in dictionary.com pretty soon here, something we're all experiencing. And what's your experience been like in surviving Zoom fatigue and finding virtual ways to connect with folks? Are you stepping into the virtual world?
Yes, absolutely. And I still don't have the answer for the Zoom fatigue, because every day we're experiencing that, just even with internal type of things. But our event marketing's mantra, our team mantra, is to create wow moments that connect and energize people. So with this in mind, we've been either sponsoring or hosting some sort of virtual experience for our target audience. So that could be virtual conferences and trade shows that have pivoted to, not all of them have, but for those that have gone to the virtual. And of course the webcasts are there, but we try to do things with phenomenal internal and external speakers. And it's not just thought leadership or product, but also, like I mentioned earlier, activities or experiences like cooking with a chef, or doing a thought leadership with a celebrity. We've really leveraged the use of sending care packages and raffle items and appreciation gifts. I think I mentioned some of those earlier, and I think it doesn't translate from the live to in person, not at all, but not all of it. But we're doing the best I feel we can outside of the normal email campaigns to increase the engagement within the attendees of our typical events.
And there often can be that magic of mixing a little bit of old school marketing with the new, whether that be in virtual or not. Chris, why don't we turn it over your way? How has your experience been in stepping into all things virtual? And have you guys really been embracing it, or are you still sticking old school?
No, we're embracing. I don't think you have a choice. It's interesting when you look back, at March, everything was webinar because people were trying to figure out what's that next step. You have to stay in front of the clients, and those engagements were through the roof. I mean, our webinar engagements were extremely high, but everybody knew that there was that next step. Like webinars have been around for a while, they're not going to be the answer. So it gave us time to look at all these digital platforms, and we've participated in, I say a handful, there's been quite a few of the digital shows that have been hosted by show organizers, which have been varying success, but it's still keys on that thought leadership piece. Kind of the same thing as a webinar is. We've seen the engagement on the thought leadership piece be really good, whether it's hosted by us, hosted by someone else. The part, and to your point, that we can't solve is that live show, face-to-face. We have some transactional products. So as we get to this point, we're back in business development, sales mode, and trying to do that in a virtual environment is really difficult. And we've talked to quite a few folks that it hasn't been solved. And I don't know if we'll get to that solve without going back face-to-face.
And maybe the future looks like some kind of a hybrid. And if you look at our chat feature, you can see that you certainly got some people excited with creating your wow moments. And I think that's sort of the theme that a lot of people are connecting with. Tina, we know you know a thing or two about that. What's your experience been like stepping into all things virtual?
Well, I've been really fortunate. Our marketing team is awesome. We have our own digital marketing director, so we've always had a lot of activity that way. We have taken advantage of the fact that there may be clients that may not have had in the past the availability to travel, right? Because some of our higher end clients are the ones that are, C-level possibly. So we have taken advantage of the fact we've embraced the virtual world, and we have hosted some strategic advisory panels. We have created for our vendors, just yesterday, we had a vendor, I shouldn't say vendor, it's a channel partner council that we created. The sales leader that's over that has been wanting to do it, but trying to get everybody together at one time has been, very difficult and challenging. So we took that and we embraced it with, what can we do to try to do those wow moments? So we, sent them a swag bag. We sent them, along with a thank you for participating, we sent them a Grubhub since it was over lunch. So, we did a spin of, we want to buy you lunch, and then we also want to give you, some nice Waystar swag. So try to create that engagement that you would at a live event prior to the panel discussion, similar to what we're doing today. So that was something that a lot of our internal teams are now wanting to copy because they've seen that it was successful. We did some in the very beginning. Somebody had mentioned the fact that we didn't want to be selling in March, right? It just didn't feel right because everybody was just so overwhelmed with what was going on, and especially since our clients are hospitals and are physicians, so they were really having a challenging time. So rather than trying to sell them something but still keep them engaged, we created a COVID resource center that has different areas of learning that would be helpful for our clients. And we hosted some webinars and we directed them to that resource center. And we use that now as part of our ongoing marketing, virtual marketing. We also did some coffee talks where our product marketing team, we would get some of our current clients together and we would host them. And then we would also do it with some of the pre-call, swag and Grubhub type things. So we're trying to keep, that old school feeling of what we all do so much, because that's what we are, is we're hosts when it comes down to it. We want everybody to be happy. We want everybody to be warm and fuzzy. So we're trying to engage that along with what the virtual world has to offer.
I'm so glad you also brought up that point about not being tone deaf early on. Being in that sales position really wouldn't have been appropriate, and good for you and the whole panel here for finding creative ways to stay relevant and stay in front of people without being salesy when it wouldn't have been tone deaf. Speaking of tone deaf, there is a topic we certainly should talk about because I know everyone watching has been experiencing, and that is changes to their budgets. So we'll throw up a quick poll question here. How has your event budget been affected in 2020? Either reallocated, reduced, eliminated, or if it stayed the same? How's your event budget been affected in 2020? So we'll invite everyone to log a quick answer there. And then in a moment, we'll hear how it's been affecting Chris. But first, let's get some answers up there on the screen, please. Okay, we'll go ahead and close down this poll. There we go. Okay, so there's about an even split, 48% saying either reallocated and 48% saying reduced. Unfortunately, 13% here saying eliminated, only 4% saying that it stayed the same. So we've got really varying answers here. Chris, we'd love to hear from you and your experience. How are you appropriating your current budget, and what have those changes been like?
Yeah, so no secrets that ours has been reallocated, reduced. Pretty much we've hit all those checkboxes. But the interesting thing we've learned is if there's a good enough idea, it'll get funded. And it's one of those, I know people always say that, but we've had instances over the last couple months where if it's a good enough idea, you write up a business plan and it gets funded. So I think that's a very important piece as we go through this. It's easy to get down and say, my budget's been taken away or it's been reallocated, but I don't think that stops, especially when you look at live events. I mean, it's some of the most creative people out there. And I don't think it stops necessarily that creativity just because there's a financial decision that's made. I know there's been a lot of great discussion about like what's been done from a digital virtual world. I don't think we're going to solve the world's issues today on the panel, but the big thing I have is just, even if the money or the budget's been reallocated, it doesn't mean that we can't stop thinking about how ways to stay in front of the clients or really impact each business. The other thing that I'm not going to even say we have to solve for is, as we look towards 2021, it's an extremely difficult decision. I mean, the 2021 budgeting process for us is kicked off, and you sit in a room and everybody looks around is like, okay, now what's next? Like, what are we going to do now? So I think that's the other piece of just being proactive and having those ideas when you go into those discussions and making it that much harder to take the budget away. It's harder to take budget away when you've got an idea and you say this can happen and this is the result.
What a great point. Before we move on to the next question, we've got an extra minute or two here allocated. Any of you want to chime in, the rest of our panel, before we move on to the next question? I know, Chris, you brought up sort of the point that Ruthy brought up earlier on too about, if you've got, you're talking about the great ideas and that you're bringing that to the room. Ruthy was bringing up that I'm losing my train of thought because I'm juggling too much in my brain. Ruthy, any thoughts you want to add to this?
From budget standpoints, that's usually not what I handle on a day-to-day, but on behalf of the company, we definitely have to reallocate some and figure out, again, creative ways to find, again, some of the money was already accounted for and was lost because of last minute changes, and it was what it was and we couldn't do much with it. Some was allocated into other different smaller events between different teams, and we have been continuing to do some sponsorships and kind of use that money that way, but not a whole lot to add here.
Hey,
yeah,
Andrew,
and Ruthy, you gave me back my, oh yeah, go ahead, please.
No, go ahead and finish out with Ruthy.
I was just going to say, thank you. You brought back the train of thought of what I wanted to bring up earlier. You mentioned that it could be helpful even to keep people engaged in coming up with those great ideas, even if they're not implemented. And that can still be a great point of success. And that was the train that totally left my mind just a moment ago. Chris, or pardon me, Bill, you had something to say.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I actually want to build on something that Chris had said. So as it relates to the budget, for us, it's been interesting. Like we're in that reallocation camp for sure. And what I've learned and liked about COVID, again, if there is anything to like, it's allowing us to think about reallocation not in a like for like. And what I mean by that is our CEO is always looking at live events and saying, how many leads did you create and what's the pipeline creation? And I think we all know in the event world that a live event in particular is just as much about brand awareness as it is about demand generation. And I think what's really been interesting for us, and this actually speaks to Terrence's question in the Q&A, is that we took some of our dollars and we actually put it into a sponsorship of a Australian rugby football team show, as opposed to doing another live event or a virtual event with it. And the brand awareness that we are getting from that is off the charts in Australia, right? In particular, where we can, we're measuring that just in that region. But I don't think, in a non-COVID world, I don't know if we'd have that opportunity to say, let's take some of those live event dollars and go in a totally different direction and sponsor this, broadcasting show that's on sports that doesn't necessarily relate to our IT audience. But all of a sudden we're starting getting all these contacts from our audience going, oh, I watch that show all the time. And so we're learning about our customer profile going, man, we had no idea that like this show was so popular with our audience, and suddenly we're going to keep investing in something that was a total test for us.
I think that innovation factor certainly is the silver lining that we're all getting from this experience that we're all in. So now looking toward the future, we want to put up a question for the audience, and that is, when are you planning to exhibit next? Obviously, there's some question marks around this one, but just roughly what's in your mind when you plan to exhibit next? In Q1, Q2, Q3, or Q4 of 2021, or if you're frankly just not planning for 2021. We'd love to get engaged in the audience, and then we'll jump in and ask our panel their thoughts on this and what their experience has been like. We'll go ahead and wait just one more quick second to get everyone to answer. When are you planning to exhibit next? Okay. And it looks like, well, this is hopeful. 59% said that they are planning to exhibit next in Q1 of 2021. And then we've got the second greatest answer coming in Q2 with 24%. So we've got about 60%, a little more than half, looking forward to Q1. And then the next quarter, representing the next quarter of answers that we've got here. So that's a hopeful way to look at the future. And what's your plan specifically in stepping back into events?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. So as of today, a lot of unknowns, right? But we are making the assumption that in-person events for us will be on hold at least until around the May or June timeframe next year. So with that in mind, we'll continue to look at virtual experiences. And also, we're anticipating a trend of hybrid events. They existed before pre-COVID, you know, but where trade shows will most likely offer a combination of virtual and on-site options for their attendees. So we're definitely preparing for that.
I mean, it's such an important topic. I want to open this up really quickly with the rest of the panel before we jump into one of our final questions here. Any of you have a thought that you'd like to add into this? There's so many question marks about when we're going to step back in. Just curious if anyone has a thought that they want to share. Tina, please go ahead.
I just want to make a comment that even though I believe our next live trade show, it would have been first quarter, but those of you that are familiar with HIMSS know that it is now being pushed to August. So that has kind of reset what our trade show calendar is going to look like. The other thing too that I think is the unknown is there are still so many companies out there that they don't know what they're doing. So association shows or, you know, shows that were sponsored by somebody else that we would attend like a HIMSS, they still have not announced what they're doing in 2021. This time, because it is budget season, this would be the time that I would be researching and my team would be going out on different websites and seeing what the dates are going to be in 2021. It's non-existent. You can't find it. That being said, I have managed 3 live events in the last 30 days, and we continue to host more live events probably in Q1, Q2 than trade shows. Now, that looks a lot different than what it used to. It is still determined by how healthy everybody feels about going out. My company is extremely conscious about asking our, team members to travel. So we're stepping very lightly on that, but we're opening up the opportunity to have the discussion to start traveling in probably second quarter. And like I said, I have managed very small meetings. Just did one in September with about 50 people. So it was very interesting how everything looked and felt, but everybody was so happy to be back together that I think that's kind of like our mindset that we want to do it, but we have to be very conscious and respect COVID and what is involved in, asking people to travel.
And Tina, continuing down this theme, that's a great segue into one of the questions that was pre-submitted to us, and that is, are there any particular safety protocols or best practices that you're expecting to receive from show organizers before you would commit to attending or to going to another live event or hosting one like this?
I'm going to speak more to meetings than trade shows. I think trade shows is so unknown right now. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind with trade shows is space. Like, how is an exhibit hall now, like a HIMSS, how is an exhibit hall now going to host 2,500 people inside of an exhibit hall, and then taking into account what our own booths are going to look like? So if I typically would do, say, a 40 by 40, and I know it's going to have 2 offices and, you know, different areas of engagement, what does that really look like now? So, and I say that I want to speak, that I can speak more to it live only because of those experiences I've had in the last 30 days. You know, I had some people that were extremely sensitive to COVID, and they felt very uncomfortable, even with a mask on, even though our tables were 6 feet apart. And then I had others that were walking around and they were just fine. They just got off the plane, they got out of, you know, their Uber. And so you've got a very high degree of emotion when you're going to be bringing all those people together. And I think that our internal, you know, feelings about not only, again, attending, but asking people to attend. If I decide to go to a trade show, I have to be able to have a team to support that. And that means my executive team has to be willing to travel. My salespeople have to be willing to travel. So I think it's going to, you know, it's one of those things where it's changing every day. I think it's going in the right direction, but I think space is going to be a big factor in how can we all respect that space and feel comfortable. And then how are we going to manage that? You know, how are we going to manage our booths, and how is an exhibit hall going to manage all that? I've seen the food being prepared in the individual serving, and, you know, the buffets and how, you know, live events are handling that. I think the hotels are doing fantastic. They're cleaner than I've ever seen them. The food handling is being done in the safest way I've ever seen. The AV and the space that is being committed to the live events is very conscientious, and everybody does have space. But I think that when we start thinking about these larger meetings, we just have to think of that space factor.
And
this is so valuable that you shared that. And I was going to just say, let me introduce also Rhiannon Anderson, one of our co-owners, who I know has some important news that you want to share about how we can advocate for a better future for our industry.
Yeah, so just quickly, we're going to put a link to a webinar in the chat. So if you're interested in getting involved and advocating for the events industry, that will be a link that we're going to go ahead and provide. We're not directly affiliated with that information. It was shared by one of the attendees who asked that I include that, which I'm happy to do because I know that our industry has been uniquely affected by what's going on. So I will put that in the group chat. Also, I've seen there are a few more Q&A questions that have popped up and a couple questions in the chat for the panelists. So as we are wrapping up, if the panelists wouldn't mind just scrolling through and seeing if anything has been directed at them, or if they can add value by answering any of the questions for the attendees. So yeah, thanks, Andrew, and go ahead.
Thank you, and please be sure to see that link that Rhiannon was talking about in the chat feature over on the side of the panel you're looking at right now. Certainly, we can all do our part to help push leadership forward. Before I turn this back over to Lance to wrap it up, I just want to very quickly open it up to the panel. Any final thoughts, anything that we should be sure to say before we wrap this thing up today?
I just wanted to mention one small thing as a shout out to Steelhead. We had an event on March that ended up not happening. And it was an amazing booth that Steelhead helped us put together. We were super excited to be using it, and then we ended up not using it. We're still going forward with the mindset that it's going to happen next March, and hopefully it will. So here's to COVID going away. We will have to probably reevaluate, to your question earlier, of some changes that will have to happen, because as much as we aim to create a lot of interactive experiences. Now we are kind of like, well, people are probably not going to want to touch things as much, and people are not going to want to be too close to each other. And so there are definitely going to be some changes done in the flow of people. And we were supposed to have a basketball court on, which I'm sure no one's going to want to touch a basketball that is being touched by 1,000 people. So stuff like that, that's definitely going to have to change.
There will be some re-engineering required, certainly. I just want to do my quick personal thanks to the panel. It's really a pleasure and honor to be here with such great minds. And let me turn, and also a quick thank you to everyone who's participated and watched today, as well as all those great questions that we got in the Q&A feature. Let me turn it back over to Lance.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. Thank you to all the panelists. I know you're extremely busy right now, so thank you so much for your time and everything that you guys have contributed. We are eternally grateful, and thank you to all the attendees for joining us as well. After the call, there will be a recording that we'll send out to all the people who have registered, so be on the lookout for an email from us. Thanks again, stay safe, stay healthy, and continue to create those wow moments.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.